This is Dr. Hymers, and I want to talk to you for a little bit about the man that schedules what Trump does. Now, I am a Trump man. I didn't vote because I don't vote anymore. I dropped out of that. But I think Trump is the best thing that's happened to our churches for a long time. And I support him. We pray for him here at church. And he's quite a fellow. I think he's done more for anti-abortion than anybody we've had in there in the White House since Reagan. And I think he's doing a good job. Now, I want to talk to you for a little bit about this man. On the front of Time magazine, they put a bad picture of him, a scary picture, but he is quite a fella. His name is Steve Bannon, and he is the one that tells Trump what to do. He's his assistant. So here's what I want you to do. There's something that came up, and I'm reading Tony Perkins' letter here, Action Alert. Last week, House Majority Whips Steve Scalise and Representative Jody Rice introduced H.R. 781, the Free Speech Fairness Act of 2017 in the House. And this is put in by Lyndon Johnson when he was senator in Texas in, I think, about 1955, and it prohibits engaging in political activities and risk if you risk your tax-exempt status if you endorse anybody for elected office in your church. But I noticed the Johnson amendment. Johnson put that through. I think that Lyndon Johnson was one of the most evil men we've ever had in the White House myself. That's my personal feeling. He not only shut down free speech in our Baptist and Protestant churches, but he also was, I believe all the evidence that I've seen, he had something to do with the murder of John Kennedy and backed it up. I've read several articles on it, and I'm not usually that kind of a preacher. I don't bring this up in the pulpit. But my personal view is that Lyndon Johnson had something to do with the killing of President John Kennedy. For instance, when they were going to take that ride through Dallas, he told, before they started out on the tour downtown Dallas, Johnson changed and put Conley, the governor of Texas, in his seat, and he went in the car behind Johnson at the last minute. And he told, behind Kennedy at the last minute, and he told Kennedy to take the bubble off the top of his car so that people could see him and love him. And of course, that doesn't look good. There are other reasons, I don't want to get into that, but Lyndon Johnson started the Vietnam War. I remember I was a young man then, and he said, if I am re-elected, I will not send your boys to Vietnam. Well, as soon as he got elected, the next year he sent 125,000 of our kids over there. Nixon gets the blame, and that is absolutely ridiculous. It's Lyndon Johnson that got us into that war, and then dragged it on out. But I'm not talking about the Vietnam War tonight. I'm talking about this Johnson amendment that says the churches cannot speak. In other words, freedom of speech stops at the church door. But notice this, and I've noticed this for years, that is, it applies only to the conservative churches. The Democrats, on the front page of the LA Times a couple of years ago, the Democrats are allowed to go into the black churches and say whatever they want and say vote for me and all that. So why is it that it seems like racial prejudice to me? I have 20 different ethnic groups in my church. We have blacks and Hispanics, and if you see our men sitting on the platform, they're all different races. So there's no racial prejudice in my mind, but there is prejudice against the liberal Democrats. They have gutted this country, and the best thing that's happened to this country in a long time, in my opinion, is Donald Trump. Now, he's not running for office, so I'm allowed to talk about him. But I want you to help me. This man, Steve Bannon, is the president's chief White House strategist. And he is a tough monkey. And I want you to send an email to him and another email to President Trump. We had 100,000 people a few weeks ago send an email to the White House from all over the world. You can send an email to the White House from anywhere in the world, and I hope you will. You can send 2 or 3 of them. You can send one to Bannon. You can send another one to Trump, and tell him to by executive order, to get rid of this Johnson amendment. It is a provision in the U.S. tax code that prohibits nonprofit organizations from endorsing or opposing political candidates. But that only applies, it was made by Lyndon Johnson, and in recent years, Wikipedia says, in recent years, Republicans, including President Donald Trump, have sought to repeal the Johnson Amendment, arguing that it restricts the free speech rights of churches and other religious groups. Repeal has been criticized because churches have fewer reporting requirements than other nonprofit organizations, because it would effectively make political contributions tax deductible. Well, that's not the point. The point is, why is free speech end when you walk in the church door? And why is it that the Democrats, every time they run, they get in the pulpits of black churches and make this big speech, and it's on television and everything? Why does it only apply to conservatives? If it was fair, they would apply it to the black churches and to the Democrats as well as the conservatives. I was very happy this last time to see President Trump in a black church, big black church in Chicago, and talking. That's the first time that's ever happened, and it threw them into a fit. CNN and the liberals and the liberal Democrats, it threw them into a fit. How dare he go in there and make an appeal? Well, why not? They've been doing it for the last 50 years. Here's what I want you to do. It's real simple. I'm going to put up an address, the address of the White House, and I'm going to tell you how to write to them. And I want you to write an email. It'll just take you a few minutes. Write an email to the president, tell him to, by executive order, to stop the Johnson Amendment, and then write one to this man Bannon, who's on the front of Time magazine this week, and tell him, go to the president, and tell him, go to the president. He's a guy that can walk in and out of the Oval Office anytime he wants. This man Bannon, he can walk in anytime he wants. You don't need to move that thing. Just leave it. He can walk into the president's office whenever he wants. He's the only man that doesn't wear a tie. He can walk in tennis shoes. He's got the president's ear. He's his chief strategist. So I want you to send an email to the president, President Trump, and an email to Steve Bannon, and tell him to tell the president to do it. There are millions of us, conservative evangelicals and conservative Catholics and conservative Jews all over the country that want that thing repealed. And this man will do it. Trump, if Bannon tells him do it, he'll probably do it. We got 100,000 of you from everywhere, Australia, Europe, everywhere, on the 3 weeks ago to get Pence. And Pence went over there and spoke at the pro-life rally. And it was great. He put it on the front page of the newspapers all over the world. It was a great victory. I want you to do the same thing with this. Just sit right down now when you're thinking about it. Don't let it go a day. And send an email to Trump. Send him 3 or 4. Get your kids to send him one. And send several of them to Mr. Bannon too. Let's get the president to repeal the Johnson Amendment by an executive order, and let's get him to do it right away. I love this country, and it's a great country, but there are some evils in it. This is one of them. Why are the conservatives churches and the conservative synagogues, why are the conservatives why are we restricted when the black churches and other churches are open for anybody to come in and rail against the United States, rail against the president, and ask for votes. Teddy Kennedy used to always go through the black churches. What's good for the goose, my mother used to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if they can't if we can't speak in our conservative churches, why should they be allowed to speak in the liberal churches? It's just common sense to me. And so you look up there on the screen, and we're going to put up there what for you to do, and then we'll see what happens. God bless you. Thank you you're in my office right in downtown Los Angeles at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. I'm just getting ready to preach, and I'm putting this message up on the front there, and I'd appreciate it very much if you'd send a few emails to Bannon and Steve Bannon and a few emails to Donald Trump, and tell him to get rid of that terrible piece of legislation, the Johnson Amendment, and do it by executive order. Why not? Obama never went through Congress. Hardly anything Obama put through Congress. He signed it himself. Executive order. Why not have Trump do that on the Johnson Amendment?